Welcome to the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Every week, you'll hear strategies for building your online service-based business your way. And now, here's your host, veteran freelancer, author, and TEDx speaker, Laura Briggs.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Advanced Freelancing Podcast. Now, I'm deviating a little bit from traditional freelancing topics to discuss some more information about my book. So if you haven't heard, my first book is being published through Entrepreneur Press and officially came out on July 16th, 2019. I wanted to share a little bit more behind the scenes about why I chose to write that book and why I think writing a book will not only benefit my coaching and consulting business, but also my freelance writing business as well. I believe that everyone has at least one book inside of them, and there's a lot of reasons why we put off the process of potentially writing and creating a book. But I want to encourage you, if you're thinking that this could be something that could be great for your personal development or even for your business, to consider. Now, writing a book for freelance writers is kind of a no-brainer. It's an excellent marketing vehicle to be able to show your writing ability. And whether you choose to self-publish or traditionally publish, being able to produce a book shows people that you have the stamina that it takes to outline, create, edit, and publish a book. So it's a great thing for credibility purposes as well when you decide to put together a book, even if it's not directly related to your freelancing business. I think for me, being a freelance writer and having a book about freelance writing only helps all aspects of my business because it's a major project no matter what. But when I'm pitching potential freelance writing clients, there's a sense of credibility and validity that comes from having a book published, right? And that doesn't matter whether it's self-published or you got it traditionally published. Now, let me share a little bit more about my book and why I specifically created this book. I have wanted to write a book for a long time, and jumping into the publishing process, I actually had the goal of starting with fiction first and went to a writing conference and had kind of a bad experience with a fiction agent. And a lot of what I learned at that conference made me feel like I would feel much more confident if I chose to go the route of nonfiction first. So a really important distinction here is that fiction books sell on completed projects, unless you're a famous writer like Stephen King, who can just call up his agent and say, thinking about a new book, it's going to be this. Right. There'll be plenty of offers coming in for that. But for new writers, so those who have never created books before, and even writers who might have had a handful of books done, fiction book sells on completed project. That means you might need to have that manuscript already, 50,000 to 120,000 words already done, and essentially gone through at least one round of developmental and general editing before you even pitch it to an agent or decide to self-publish it yourself. Nonfiction books sell on spec. That means they sell on proposal. So I knew it would be much easier for me as a deadline-oriented freelancer to sell a book on proposal, because the proposal, it took me a long time to get that document right and ready for submission to agents, but it was about 55 pages, and it was everything that sort of backed up why I wanted to write this book, why I thought it would sell, and then some information about the chapters that I proposed. Now, some of the chapters that I proposed, shifted, of course, in the process of actually creating the book, but your proposal is essentially your pitch to both agents and publishers as far as what you think you want to do. So I knew for me that I would definitely finish writing a book if a publisher said, this is your deadline and you have to finish it by this particular point in time. So after that conference, which was in the summer of 2017, I decided to write a nonfiction book proposal. And I'm so glad that I did, because I learned so much in that process. Now, nonfiction, even though it sells on proposal, has its own unique sets of challenges, right? Nonfiction books sell on proposal, but they also sell based on platform. That means that for a publisher to pick up your traditional nonfiction book for regular publishing, you're going to need to show that you already have an audience of willing and excited buyers to buy that book. Platform can be shown in many different ways: YouTube subscribers, other social media followings, an email list, substantial traffic to your blog. But the truth is that Most people don't have that platform. Even going into this with somewhat of an established platform, mine was small. And that was the number one thing that we heard from publishers, was that my platform wasn't big enough. That's why you see a lot of books that come out from people who are advanced executives. They're professional public speakers. They have a massive following. I mean, just think of how many bloggers have produced cookbooks or cleaning guides or memoirs. It's because they have a massive following. I even know somebody else in the nonfiction space who had to agree to sell 10,000 copies of his book to his audience before the publisher would take the deal. So it was a 6-figure publishing deal, but he also had to agree to sell 10,000 copies of his own to his audience as part of that. So kind of a 6-figure publishing deal, kind of not, right? So there's a lot of unique things in the publishing world, but I knew that I would finish on deadline at a bare minimum. So I spent about 4 months creating my book proposal. I knew I wanted to write about freelancing. Funnily enough, the book we sold is not the book that we pitched. So I am self-publishing the book that we originally pitched with my agent. I spent about 4 months on that proposal. Didn't need a full 4 months, but I was questioning a lot of things. I was much slower than I was with other types of writing projects because I was new to the whole concept of publishing and writing book proposals. So it took me much, much longer because of that. I finished my proposal, I want to say in January of 2018, and then I shifted into evaluating agents. Now, if you're going to go the route of traditional publishing, there's a lot of different places to find potential literary agents. You can attend a conference like I did and pitch them live. You always want to pitch an agent only if the book you're writing is in line with what they take. So someone who only does children's books, for example, does not want to hear your, new adult memoir, right? So you have to do some research about these agents to decide who's right for you. I was looking for a versatile agent who'd sold not only business books, but hopefully had some crossover into other genres, because I knew I didn't want to write just business and just nonfiction forever. So I identified 33 literary agents. I used a tool called Publishers Marketplace. It is a paid tool. You pay $25 a month. That could change depending on when you're listening to this episode, but you will see different deals and books that agent has represented. Another great place to start is find books that you like, and usually the author will credit their agent in the acknowledgments section. So you can use that as sort of your opening hook and line in your query letter and submission to say like, hey, I saw you represented so-and-so on this book. I love this book. I have something that's sort of related. I think this might be a fit for you. Also, the writers, there's a huge volume for writers that has everything you would need to be able to review agents. Now, this is a massive volume of stuff that it's called Writer's Market, and it has everything from magazines that you can pitch to different writing competitions and awards, but they also do one every year it comes out, and they break it down by agent as far as what that agent checks. And what that agent accepts as far as submission. So you can double check your work by going with Writer's Market and then going into Publishers Marketplace to make sure they're still active. Publishers Marketplace was recommended to me because sometimes you'll see an agent in Writer's Market who seems like a fit, but then you go and look and they haven't sold any books in the last 5 to 6 years, right? And that's kind of scary, right? Like if somebody's not motivated to sell, we don't necessarily want to work with them. So that's why I recommend doing both of those things. So once you get to that point in the process, you submit to agents, you maybe have some conversations with agents who are interested, and then hopefully you eventually sign with an agent who's going to shop that book. You're going to sign an agreement with the agent. Agents take a standard commission of 15% of what you do. Sometimes the contract will be just for that one project. Sometimes it's an ongoing representation for a time period in which that agent would be entitled to 15% of whatever you sell during that time. So you always want to read your contracts very carefully, both with an agent and both with a publisher. Like you want to make sure you have an attorney. I had a lawyer. I paid a lawyer to go through and review both, and she caught quite a few things that needed to be updated and changed with the publisher contract specifically. So it can be a very long process even to sell a nonfiction book. My book coming to market was whirlwind warp speed for the publishing industry. Traditional timeline for publishing is about 2 years from the time that the idea is accepted to the time when there's a physical book copy that you can hold in your hands. Self-publishing is much faster. It could be a couple months depending on your writing and editing speed, right? So traditional publishing, I knew I was getting an offer in the summer of 2018, which was pretty fast because I signed with my agent in May. What happened was we pitched to a lot of big publishing houses and we got a lot of feedback that my platform was too small. So, also, there's kind of like I think publishers a little bit can sometimes be a little behind where the trends are at. So pitching a book about freelancing, I don't think a lot of the publishers really understood how powerful freelancing is in the economy. So I think that if you're doing something that's kind of cutting edge or controversial, sometimes that can be a hard sell depending on who you're pitching with, as far as what agent you're pitching and as far as what publishing houses you're pitching, because some publishing houses are like, yes, we want to be on the cutting edge. This is like a new thing or a new concept that's out. We want to be ahead of the curve. But sometimes they're behind the curve. And I really felt like that was the case with the freelance book that I was pitching to have sold. I just don't think they really saw how powerful and how many freelancers there are in not just the US, but around the world right now. So in the process of this, we were getting lots of great feedback. We had a major publisher interested in my book that I had wanted to write. And then we got a response from Entrepreneur that said they didn't want to take on the project of the bigger book, at least at that point in time, but they had kind of an opening in something they were working on where the last book that had been written about sort of introductory freelance writing was very outdated. It needed a total refresh. And would I be interested in writing that book instead? So we went back and forth. We had conversations. I talked to a number of different agents, talked to my agent about it, and kind of decided that this would be a really good place to start, because even though my business is shifting towards helping intermediate and advanced freelancers, being able to offer something at the introductory level where it's a book where I can put a lot of that information into one place and direct people to when they're beginners was a great choice. And it was also, it was a really good chance for me to see exactly how long it was going to take me to write a book. So I believe that I had the contract signed like mid-August and the book was due December 1st. So my first draft was due December 1st of around 60 to 65,000 words. So that's actually really fast in the writing world. However, as a writer, I'm a pretty fast writer, pretty fast outliner. I knew I could do it. So I stuck with that schedule, and I met that deadline. And then I believe it went through one round of edits that I had to complete around Christmas time. I know I was editing it over Christmas. And then the first 2 weeks of January, I was doing additional copy edits. So there was a publisher edit, which was sort of overview. They left a lot of comments in there like, I think this should be moved. We're missing this. I think this is redundant, etc. And then the copy edit came back at the end of 2018, kind of beginning of 2019, there were tons of changes there. That's your commas, punctuation, grammar, things that are unclear, links that don't work, all that kind of stuff. And if it will make you feel any better, like no one is immune to making lots of edits. I opened that document and there were more than 5,000 changes I had to either manually accept and update, or I had to decline and then submit my reason of saying like, this is why I don't want this edit to go through. This doesn't make sense. Most of the edits I did accept and didn't fight because they made sense and they made the book better. But did it take me a long time to go through manually with those 5,000 edits? Yes. So no one is immune to that. And you kind of have to look at it as like, it's making the book better, right? So if you get a good editor, if you get good people at your publishing house, the process is so much easier. I really loved working with Entrepreneur Press because they had certain things they wanted me to cover, certain stylistic things and ways they wanted things laid out, but they were really leaning on my expertise as far as what does a beginner freelance writer need to know. So it was the perfect blend of structure with also some creativity on my part. as well. So the book went into print very quickly after those final changes were accepted. We had maybe like 10 more things that had to be addressed after the round of 5,000 edits. And then it went into production. I got my copies in June, and then the book was available for pre-order from like March until July 16th when it dropped and went live. So the process of writing a book, I honestly can't say enough good things about it. I had really psyched myself out that it was going to be this huge thing. It was going to be super difficult at all stages, that it would take me forever to finish, that it would be really painful. Honestly, it really wasn't. So I had a great agent who was advocating for me. I worked with a publishing house that was very easy to kind of like get along with and ask questions of. I had very clear expectations about what marketing they were going to do. So that's really a topic for a whole other podcast episode, like what it really takes to market a book. But I wanted to give you some background information about what it was like to kind of like sell and write the book. I wrote the book kind of like one chapter at a time. I think I had, it was like 11 or 12 chapters. It shifted because as I wrote the book, there were things that I felt needed to be combined, deleted, moved around. So the original outline that I proposed to the publisher changed quite a bit over the process of me writing the book. But I kind of had this idea of like 12 chapters, around 5,000 words each, right? That's going to get me to 60,000. So I used a spreadsheet. I was keeping track. It was sort of automatically tabulating how many overall words I had. And then I would use color coding to flag like what I thought needed the most work. So if chapter 4 only had 200 words, that was yellow, like you need to go in there and fix that. If I felt a chapter was done and was just sort of pending being merged with everything else, I would color it green. So, and the other thing I'll share too is like I wrote a lot of this book in chaotic situations. My husband was traveling all over the country in November and December 2018 for interviewing for jobs and residency positions. So I wrote a lot of this on planes. I know that I did the final edit before I sent it to the publisher for that December 1st deadline. I know that I did that on a 4-hour Delta flight. I remember like feeling that pressure of like, I've got to get this done on this particular flight. It was like towards the end of November, so I was getting close to the deadline. But I wrote a lot of it in planes, in airports while my husband was in interviews, like the coffee shops, university libraries, all over the place. And it really helped motivate me. Like the fact that there was so much other stuff going on outside of writing the book in our personal lives really helped me stay focused and on track. So here's my final piece of parting advice to you from this episode. If you're thinking about writing a book, even if you hear this and you're like, traditional publishing isn't for me, right? That's okay. I still encourage you to write a book and to set a deadline and stick to it because it's a really good process that pushes you to the next level. Every stage of this pushed me to be a better writer, a more focused writer, to take feedback from other people because you're going to get your book edited even if you don't go the traditional publishing route. Now, if you're interested in getting the book, I'll share that information in just a second. Why did I write this particular book and what was the frame of mind I had when creating it? This is the book I wish I had when I'd started freelance writing. In 2012, there were some resources out there, but let's be honest, most of them were extremely dated. They were talking about marketing, via direct mail letters. They were talking about the importance of, having access to a fax machine. They were just really, really outdated. A lot of the freelance writing stuff, honestly, still today, there's still some of it out there talking about like why you need clips and how to pitch magazines. And it's like freelance writing has changed so much. So the frame that I wrote this book in is online freelance writing. I did not include hardly any information about pitching magazines or selling personal essays because that's not my area of expertise. And also because I believe that's a really hard way to build your business as a freelance writer because it's not recurring revenue. Even if you have an ongoing relationship with a magazine, it's still hit or miss. It might last for a couple months. You might get an assignment here or there, but it's not as predictable as putting clients on retainer and selling emails, sales copy, blogs, articles, things of that nature. So that's how and why I wrote the book. I wanted a newbie to be able to pick up this book and figure out if freelance writing was right for them based on what a real day in my life as a freelance writer looks like, some of the challenges I've experienced, what it really takes to continuously do this and possibly build it from a side hustle to a full-time career and source of income for you. So that is really everything that I approached the book was like, what does this person actually need to know? I had to cut tons of information, right? I could have easily written 80 or 100,000 words about this topic, but I had to keep it focused on what I felt was most important. So there's stuff in there about marketing. There's stuff in there about mindset. There's stuff in there about creating samples and setting rates. And a lot of that stuff is really introductory. Like, what do you need to know to make this work, or decide if it is something you even want to make work for you? So I hope this has been a really good introduction, sort of a brief storytelling of why I decided to write the book. It's available at all major retailers. So go ahead and check it out. It's not, it's 60,000 words, but it's kind of a, thin book in print. So you can kind of flip through to the chapter that's most relevant to you or read the whole thing. I'd love to hear your comments about the book or even your questions about the book writing process. Send those to info@betterbizacademy.com.